Good morning, everybody. We're delighted to be able to present this CB Pairs supported tax briefing seminar for you this morning online. It's designed to support cross-border employees, and we're working along with the Dundalk Chamber to present that today. It's clear today how important it is to provide this kind of information and support when you look at the number of people that have registered to attend. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information around the Cross-Border Partnership for Employment Services, CB Pairs. My name's Anna Doherty. I'm the CEO of the Londonderry Chamber, but also I'm an advisor on the CB Pairs partnership. I cover Derry City and the Northwest alongside 5 other cross-border advisors, including Brenda McGeaney from the Dundalk Chamber. Together, we cover all 6 counties of Northern Ireland, as well as the border counties of Ireland, Cavan, Donegal, Leitrim, Louth, Monaghan, and Sligo. My screen is not going to the next. I might have to change this.
There you go.
I need to go back now. The Cross-Border Partnership, CB Pairs, came into effect on the 1st of January 2022 and replaced the EURES Cross-Border Partnership post-Brexit to support work mobility between the border counties in Ireland and Northern Ireland. Funding for the partnership rotates between the Department for Social Protection and Department for Communities in Northern Ireland, with responsibility currently being with the DSP. Responsibility for delivery management and financial accountability of CB Pairs is split between a steering committee, a coordinator, and the group of advisors I just mentioned. The steering committee is the principal decision-making body of the cross-border partnership. It's made up of representatives from each of the 8 partner organisations you see there, all of whom have an active interest in cross-border and have authority to speak on behalf of their respective organisations. The partnership consists of DFC and DSP, as already mentioned, the employer membership organisations, ourselves, the Derry Chamber, and also the Dundalk Chamber of Commerce, Trades Unions Unite and the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, and the business groups CBI in Northern Ireland and IBEC in the Republic of Ireland. CB Pairs aims to promote the benefits of cross-border labour mobility and to increase awareness of job opportunities and economic development across the region. It provides opportunities for employers and job seekers to realise the full potential of having access to a larger labour market, along with the free offer of support. The Northwest City region here is the 4th largest urban agglomeration on the island of Ireland, centred around the urban cross-border core of Derry, Letterkenny and Strabane, and it holds a unique position, offering full access to both EU and the UK jurisdictions. So the free movement of labour is critical to our cross-border economy. CB Pairs works with employers in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to support recruitment needs by running job fairs on-site and virtual. We have a reciprocal process whereby DSP will advertise vacancies on their Jobs Ireland platform for Northern employers, and vice versa. The Department of Communities in Northern Ireland will facilitate Southern employers to advertise on the jobapplyni.com platform. Our 2 chambers run events like this one for cross-border employers and employees, as well as seminars around incentives for employers cross-border. CB Pairs can also arrange English language for employability training for sectors where there's most need. Our website, cbpairs.com, has a lot of information on the various supports we offer and a huge bank of FAQs around cross-border working with helpful answers. If you'd rather just email any of us in the partnership, our contact details are on the website, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with any queries that you may have. There are, of course, a number of issues around employers and job seekers that they might encounter on a day-to-day basis. Many of them are very complex in nature, such as tax and social security implications. And we consult with experts like Rose Tierney and Martin Casey, our speakers today, and others who can offer a wide knowledge and experience of cross-border issues. My contact details are there. As I say, other advisors are available through our website, so please do use that. And I'm going to stop sharing, and I will now hand you over to Rose Tierney for the first part of our briefing today. If you have any questions, please use the chat box to address them, and we'll pick them up after the two presentations. There is some time allocated then. And the recording and the slides will be shared with everybody who registered, just for your information. Thank you. Over to you, Rose.
Thank you, Anna. Are you sharing that, Emil? Yeah. Here we go. Okay, so some of you who registered for today's seminar would have heard me talk about this issue before. It's something that I've worked on for the last 20 to 25 years. So there's a lot of information that I've gathered over those years. And I'm delighted that Martin Casey's joined me today, because likewise, he has worked in this arena for many, many years and deals with an awful lot of cross-border workers. I deal with both employers and workers. And so together between the two of us, hopefully we'll have a lot of information to share with you today. And one of the big changes, I suppose, the last time since I talked about this, can I move these slides, or Emil, are you moving them? Yeah. Okay. One of the big things I've talked about is that there's a LEAF report that was due to be published, and it now has been published on the 11th of November. And that was a report that was commissioned by the Labour Economic Employment Forum in the South, and funded by the Shared Island Group out of the Department of Taoiseach. It's independent research. It's not a government report. It's not an ESRI report, although ESRI contributed some numbers to it. It's definitely independent research. And what we did was we held workshops with employers and employees around what issues they were facing. So it's real evidence of what is going on the ground. Now, we've had some very good feedback on the report from different departments, and it's been through various different bodies, IBEC, etc. And we're hoping that this will gain some traction in terms of trying to get some changes made. But what we tried to do was to try and simplify something that is so complex, it's actually very hard to understand. But it's a very long report if you go to read it. And the reason is that it's the first time in 2 decades that this depth of information has been gone into in terms of in one place at one time. There was a report about 20 years ago, and some of the issues that were relevant then, just after the Good Friday Agreement, are still relevant now, and no changes have been made, which is, a real indictment in terms of the system that we have. But one of the big things that coming out of it is that if you're trying to drill into what all the issues are, the issues themselves and Martin will be talking about, you can try and drill it down to what are the core issues? What are the core issues we need to solve before we can then, solve all the little issues that fall out of that? So that's what I'm trying to do in terms of how we demonstrate this. If you just move it on there, yeah. We've got some, the 2 core issues in relation to cross-border employment, the way I see it and the way that I lay out my material, is that the foreign employer registration requirement, which requires an employer to set up a payroll on the opposite side of the border, dependent on where the individual is resident and where they're carrying out their duties. That is real complication, particularly for SMEs. Because SMEs don't have the money to throw at it to try and sort it all out for them. Whereas large organizations, where it's just a little blip on the map, they said Ireland's not that big for them, and they just throw money at advisors and they sort it out for them. So SMEs can't do that. And what we need to really do is to say, well, can we reduce the incidences where foreign employer registration is required? I'll go into in a moment what those instances are. The other big one is pension rules cross-border as well. The pension cross-border rules don't allow somebody who is living on one side of the border but working for an employer on the other to get tax relief on their pension contributions. And there's added complications as well. They can potentially get taxed on the employer contributions, depending on which direction you're going, north, south, south, north. And there's also issues with the drawdown of pension as well. So to simplify the pension issues would take an awful lot of complication away, which I'll explain what the complication is. If we could solve those 2 issues, a lot of the other subsidiary issues could fall away, or at least be reduced. So I've tried to lay it out in diagrammatic format here. So if we look at the foreign employer registration, out of that requirement comes the dual payroll requirement. So say you've got somebody who lives on one side of the border, but their employment is on the other, and they normally commute to work. So let's say Martin lives in Newry, and he commutes every day to Dundalk to work. That's fine. The employer in Dundalk sets up an ROI payroll. Martin's on the ROI payroll. But if Martin wants to carry out duties north of the border, so he's sent out to a customer or a client, or he's works from home, now there's an extra responsibility on the employer. The employer's generally going to have to set up a payroll for them, unless they've no other presence at all in the jurisdiction. They're going to have to set up a payroll, which means a dual payroll requirement. That has knock-on effects, because the knock-on effects of that is that now that the employee is split between two payrolls, Social Security becomes an issue. Which jurisdiction has responsibility? So generally, when more than 25% of your duties are carried out in your home jurisdiction, your entire Social Security obligation shifts to there. But there's changes in those rules coming too, because Ireland's signing up to an EU thing that's moving the 25% threshold to 40%, but the UK maybe not doing that. So now we've got misalignment. There's also other issues that Martin will go into a little bit more, which is about, the knock-on effect of dual payroll around mortgages, income protection, health insurance, all sorts of ramifications about benefits and what the impact is on benefits. And then there's the other issue, which is on one side of the border in the south, we've got a trans-border workers relief, which really helps to alleviate some of the other problems, like the pension issue. But we really need that relief to be kept. At the moment, the numbers claiming that are actually very low. So there's been little intimations that, oh, that could be pulled, that relief could be taken away, and that's not where we want to be at all. So on the pension side, then, what are the complications there? Of the pension, the cross-border tax rules basically say that the only time that an employee gets tax relief when you make a pension contribution and you're in cross-border situation is where you've moved across the border, changed your residency, but continue to contribute to the scheme you used to contribute to. So if you continue to contribute to that scheme, you'll still get the same tax relief you got before you change your residency, but now on the opposite side of the border. The other one is a treaty relief, where it says that if you're a posted worker, where if you're posted by the employer to work on the opposite side of the border for the same employer or a connected employer, you can get tax relief on your pension contributions. You're contributing to the same scheme through the same employer group. But that's not the normal situation for most cross-border workers. Most cross-border workers live on one side of the border and happen to work on the other side. And there is no tax relief for pension contributions when you're in that scenario. In addition, if you're living in the south, working in the north, there's no tax relief when you return your foreign income to the Irish revenue. And unless you qualify for trans-border workers relief, you're going to have an additional tax liability. So you're not going to get the tax relief, so it doesn't become a very tax efficient investment for you. In addition, there's a question mark over whether or not you should be taxed on the employer contributions that the employer made to your pension in north of the border, because again, the relief doesn't work properly because you live on the opposite side of the border. So there's huge complications here that a lot of people are not aware of. They're floating below the radar. We've seen it come up time and time again since COVID, because the numbers of cross-border workers prior to that would have been smaller, I suppose, but with remote working, they've increased dramatically. Now employers are pulling away from recruiting people who want to work remotely cross-border and saying, no, you can't work remotely cross-border. So we're now seeing the numbers reduce, which is strange. They've all gone up, and now they're reducing, or people are hiding where they're working from. And that's not a great situation to be in. It means that the rules don't work. The rules don't work because they're designed for international large companies where they fly people in and out of the country. So they don't really fit the land border scenario. And so a lot of the slides here are sort of ones I would have dealt with before, the complications with dual payroll. If you want to move on there, Emil, there's the issue with, what your work pattern is. How do you decide, how much duties are taxed either side of the border? So you think of a delivery driver. They won't have a pattern, depending on where the customers have to be delivered to. They won't have a pattern of work either side of the border that's regular. So technically they would have, if the dual payroll was set up for them because they work for a Northern Ireland store that's delivering product and they live in the Republic of Ireland. If they deliver in Northern Ireland, that's fine. They're doing all their duties where their employer is. But if they deliver on their own side of the border where they live, dual payroll is required. Now, in a lot of situations, this has not been operated for the simple reason it's very, very complicated. And when legislation doesn't work like that, and there isn't clear guidance to it as to how it should work, then really it's not something that we should have. We should have changes to that. And one of the big things that came out of the LEAF report, which I'll go on to talk a little bit more about, was that there's a big information failure. If you go to look for guidance in relation to a land border worker, somebody who crosses the border on the land border in Ireland to work, you'll not find any examples of that, either in HMRC guidance or in the Irish Revenue guidance, because all of the examples are about international travel. So there's a huge information failure on this. And so if the guidance isn't there and the legislation is too hard, too costly, too complex to implement, then it doesn't work. And that's why we want changes. So if you want to move on there were simplifications made to facilitate mainly the international travel, again, called real-time tax credits. So if you ended up in a dual payroll scenario, then there was a real-time tax credit brought in where you could, if you're running a shadow payroll, then you could take into account the fact that there was taxes being deducted in the other jurisdiction at the same time, so you get credit for that. So you wouldn't have two lots of tax taken out of the same week's or month's wage. And that's what the real-time tax credit was designed to do. But if you look at the detail on that, it's actually only available to residents of the jurisdiction, not non-residents. So when you've got this complex cross-border situation, which sometimes the real-time tax credit is not available, even if you do have dual payroll, that means double deduction on a week's wage or a month's wage. You can see why now employers might not be implementing this. They wouldn't get employees to work for them for no wage. So why would they? So that's why we're crying out for changes here. When you do have a situation where you've got dual payroll, sometimes the employer funds the taxes on the other side of the border, called shadow payroll, but then that's a loan to an employee, and a loan to an employee is a benefit in kind. And that's taxed, depending on which side of the border you're on, two different rates. There's a higher rate in the Republic of Ireland, 13.5%, and it's 2.25 in the north. But that's an additional tax burden on the employee. So if you want to simplify things, you've got to get rid of that scenario. Now, it's very hard to get traction to do that. And so that's what this report was about. It's the first time we've been, asked as advisors in this area. So Maureen O'Reilly, who's an economist, Amory O'Kane, who's the manager of the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation, myself, I'm a cross-border dual qualified tax advisor, and Anne Devlin from the ESRI. The four of us together put together the report, and the report goes into a lot of these details as to what the complications are and provide some examples. But we also looked at how difficult it is to implement, so why it is that employers maybe aren't being compliant in this regard. But employers are running scared, employees are running scared, judging by the number of queries that I get across my desk, and I'm sure that's no different for Anna or Martin or anybody else in terms of the number of cross-border workers and employers who are concerned about this. The numbers that came out of a recent ESRI survey that was published there late summertime was that there's nearly 20,000 cross-border workers. And that's only people who, when you think about it, people who answered a survey, and therefore the numbers were extrapolated. But there's lots of people I know who don't answer surveys. They're really keeping their heads down. So that's an estimate of the numbers, but that's a lot of people. But when you talk to policymakers, they'll say, oh, in the context of the whole country, that's a very small number. I'm thinking, it's a very big number in the border region. And that's what needs to be looked at. It really does impact a lot of people here. And now it's no longer just the border region, it's island-wide as well. You have a lot of people remotely working for employers, say living in Munster and working for an employer in Ulster or vice versa. So it's very, very important that that they're recognised as well. Do you want to keep moving on there, Emil? Yeah. So we've covered that already, but the interest rates. And the other thing to mention is as well that there's been a sort of an observation that a lot of government workers are sort of advantaged in terms of what's known as Article 18 of the treaty. And this is Article 18 of the Double Tax Treaty allows certain government workers who provide government service to only be taxed in the jurisdiction of payment. And so that would be your higher ranking civil servants, also your local authority workers, and your education establishments are government funded as well. That means that if they're on payroll, they live on one side of the border, but they work on the other side, say as a teacher, and then they're on the payroll in the jurisdiction where they're working, and they're only taxed in that jurisdiction. But when you look at it closely, you'll see that if they actually carry out any of their role from their home jurisdictions, to say they work from home a few days a week, then suddenly they're kicked out of Article 18 for that portion of their duties, and they're back to the normal rules that normal cross-border workers have to deal with, and there isn't tax relief in the same way that they then didn't end up in this potentially dual payroll and self-assessment obligation scenario. And that's not widespreadly known, judging by the feedback that we got in the research that we're doing. It doesn't seem to be widespread at all that anybody is really implementing the rules around those government workers. And that maybe was something that was a little bit of sting in the tail for some people reading this in, well, we didn't realize this was an issue. It is an issue and it needs to be addressed. Can you move on there, please, Emil? So there's just a quick example. Daniel said, no, these are not real people. Okay, just to say that. Daniel works, as I say, for Louth County Council. He's resident in Uri, but works from home some days a week. The fact that he carries out duties in Northern Ireland pushes him out of Article 18, and potentially there's ROI payroll and UK payroll required, and a self-assessment obligation with HMRC. Sheila works for a local authority in the north and lives in Dundalk. She works from home 2 days a week. The fact that she carries out duties from her home out of NI means potentially, again, dual payroll, and a portion of her duties would have to be returned to HMRC as well. So you'd wonder how many people in that scenario are actually being subject to those rules. I know that of the examples that we looked at, none were. And that's sort of, tells me that it isn't really being implemented. So if you move on there, please, Emil. So having such a complicated system in small businesses that doesn't work, to me, isn't fair. But you try using the word discrimination in a report, you won't get to use it, is all I could say. But it isn't fair. What has come out even recently, even since the publication of the report, is that why aren't the bigger companies that are now faced with this doing anything about it? Well, we find that they're of the companies that are sort of crying out for help here, tends to be the SMEs. So it's the micro businesses, the small businesses, and the medium-sized businesses, and their representative organizations like the IBEX and so forth. But who's not really screaming blue murder about this are the very big firms. Because you think, well, the very big firms, the rules work really well for their international travel. Sometimes their land border movements on this are very, very small in the context of the business overall, as a worldwide organization potentially. And what they do is they hand it over to their advisors and just say, sort it out for us. And so the advisors are getting loads and loads of fees for sorting it out for them, and they don't want any change. Unfortunately, when government looks for advice on these things, they tend to look to the bigger firms. And when the bigger firms are saying, no, it's all right, because they're getting plenty of fees out of it, they're not hearing problems that we're pushing forward here. And I suppose that's where we need the more publicity and more traction on this, that this is an issue. And yes, maybe the big companies aren't screaming about it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't affect the rest. Can you move on, please, Emil? There are complications when you delve into the detail as well. So, for example, workday is defined differently on either side of the border. And that's why we end up potentially with somebody getting taxed in both jurisdictions. One thing that made a lot of noise during the COVID lockdowns and the relaxations of the rules would have been the trans-border workers relief. And this is a very, very valuable relief for ROI residents who commute to work in Northern Ireland or any treaty country, in fact. They have to have a foreign employment, they have to remain resident in ROI, they have to commute at least once a week back to Ireland and remain resident there. It has to last at least 3 months. It can't be a company of which they're proprietary director. And if that is their only source of income, they don't pay any further tax in the Republic of Ireland. Now, when I say this is a really, really important relief, it became evident as we start running examples during the report that you take, for example, an Irish resident who is commuting to work in Northern Ireland and is paying a pension contribution through the payroll in Northern Ireland. Technically, when they return that income to the Irish revenue, they're not allowed tax relief on that pension contribution. That would mean a higher liability in the Republic of Ireland. But if that is their only source of income, trans-border relief masks that. So it's not evident that they're not getting that tax relief because they're not paying any extra tax in the Republic of Ireland if they satisfy all the conditions for the relief. Now, if they work from home, they're kicked out of the trans-border workers relief rules. So that portion of their income where they work from home doesn't qualify for the relief. So suddenly now they do have a tax liability. And the impact of that non-tax relief for the pension contribution is going to be more starkly evident. And some of the cases that I've come across in the last few years where people change their pattern of residency and where they work since COVID, want to be back near a family, etc., and took their employment duties with them and worked from home. a lot of those people end up with very, very high tax liabilities that they were not expecting at all. We're talking about thousands. And this is such a stark difference between the two rates. Tax in USC and the Republic of Ireland on level is much higher than tax in Northern Ireland. So when you convert it over, there's actually can be very high tax liabilities. So this relief is a very valuable relief, but the numbers claiming it are very small. There's less than 2,000 people claiming that. And some of those are people who fly internationally, they're not land border workers. So I would say that whatever changes we want here, we want this relief kept. And if we can sort out the foreign employer registration requirement and the pension issue, the two big issues, then we can look at this to see, is there any way to tweak this to accommodate land border workers? Because if we can reduce, like other countries have done, other countries have moved ahead. You can move on there, Emile, please. Other countries have moved ahead and looked at, what they do with their land border. So basically what the Irish government had said to those of us who were lobbying in the past during COVID and subsequent was that they needed to wait to see what the EU said and what the OECD said. And then basically the EU said, nothing to do with us. Go on ahead, make your own agreements. It's your issue. Do bilateral agreements. So other countries did, and they moved ahead. And some of the European countries now have relationships with their counterparts on the other side of the border, basically talking about the number of days an employee can work without it creating these issues, creating PE issues or creating dual employment issues. So if other countries can do it, why can't we? We can move ahead and do a bilateral agreement. What we need is cooperation between the two jurisdictions. You can keep moving on there, Emile. I'm skipping through these quite fast because we've got limited time. So PE risk, I mentioned that. That's where a company, say, has a risk of having a corporation tax liability on the other side of the border. What might create that? Well, if they set up a branch, it would create it. But if they had an employee working on the other side of the border, does that create it for them? And there's been different research done on this in the European Union and various places at OECD level. And that is the first issue the OECD are looking at. They're looking at this in 2025 and hoping to have a report by the end of 2025 on the corporate tax risk. Only after that will they then look at the employer tax risk. So it's way down the line for the OECD, which sort of is the one that sort of sets out what a treaty might look like or how it should be amended, and then countries follow suit. If they're not going to look at the employer issue to 2026, then we need to get on with it now on a bilateral basis, not wait on the OECD. So the permanent established risk, maybe having one employee on the other side of the border mightn't create a permanent establishment risk, but those rules have changed as well. So since 2019, they now look at a much bigger picture. They look at all of the activities of the organization and its associated companies in a particular jurisdiction. So if you had 2 or 3 employees working from home on the opposite side of the border, you'd have to consider, do you have a corporation tax risk as well? So there's lots of subsidiary issues here that need to be addressed. But if we could deal with the first 2, then I think a lot of the others can fall away. You can keep moving there, Emile, please. Yeah. So if you think about a company, if it has a corporation tax risk, it's a bigger risk for an ROI company to have employees working in the north than it is for a Northern Ireland company to have employees working in the south. And why is that? That's because the corporation tax rates are very different. 12.5% in the Republic of Ireland becomes potentially 25% north of the border if they have permanent establishment there, whereas the other way around, a 25% rate north of the border is actually a 12.5% rate south of the border. So there's much more risk for ROI companies having individuals working north of the border. Keep going on there, yeah. There's other issues here that I think Martin might go into a little bit more, which is the subsidiary issues about, well, what knock-on effect does things like dual payroll have around, income protection, insurance, mortgage applications, redundancy, etc. And we'll keep motoring on because Martin will dovetail in with those a little bit later on. And same with mortgages as well, yeah. So there is guidance on this, and the guidance is in those 2 places. So say I've been working in this arena for 25 years now at this point, and I've put up material like this for the various chambers and for CBPES, and only recently I found that somebody had actually plagiarized all my material and put it out as their own on a different government-funded seminar. And I thought, I don't take that lightly because this material has not been put together in 5 minutes. And you can imagine there's been a lot of years of experience and examples thrown into this over the years. So I'll be calling anybody out that I see doing this again. If I use phrases or examples, I expect them to, do their own or at least cite me on them. You can keep moving on, please. Thanks. Social insurance is a big issue as well. I've mentioned that already, that if 25% of your duties are carried out in your home state, then the entire obligation shifts. It looks like we're moving from 25% to 40% tests there. What would that mean? Well, if we could line up something like your work from home days with the Social Security obligation of 40%, that could give most people the ability to work at home 2 to 3 days a week without impacting, having a dual payroll requirement. It lines up with the social insurance rule, and potentially if you could pull the PE issue out of that as well, there is a potential solution that to be worked towards. And it's not insurmountable in my view. I think this can be done. It's getting the right people in the right departments to listen to what we want here. And I suppose keep moving on there, Emil. Thank you. There's other issues, that people see cross-border as well. I mean, at the minute, there's a limited opportunity to top up your UK state pension if you work there at any time. So the years between 2006 and 2016 can be filled in if you had worked there prior to sort of build a little bit extra state pension. You keep moving on there too. And that's just an example. I think I've looked up before that every employer needs to consider whether or not they've got an obligation. So say Cara in this example, she works, for a company in the ROI, she's living in Northern Ireland, and she only has to attend, the office, once a month, for 1 or 2 days and work the rest of the time at home. Now, she's working and living in her employer jurisdiction. So really, they should be setting up a payroll for her unless they have no other, presence at all in Northern Ireland or in the UK. And then they really need to set up a payroll for her. But sometimes employers will say, I'm not doing that. And so what's the correct way to deal with it, really? You can go on to the next slide. So if the employer has absolutely no presence, then they can set up what's called a direct payment scheme. So the national insurance is dealt with, but the employee deals with their own, obligations under self-assessment. But it's very rare that the employment has nothing else going on in the jurisdiction. Usually there's something going on. So really what you're into is an obligation to register as an employer. So if they're spending more than 25% of their duties in Northern Ireland anyways, they're into the social security system in Northern Ireland, which has a knock-on effect that HMRC say, well, where's the payroll? And so you're into payroll then, and then you're potentially into corporation tax. So everything has a knock-on effect. It's a bit like a domino effect. And I think that's where employers need to be cognizant that there are complications there and there isn't clear guidance. Seminars like this do their very best to inform employers and employees, but you look for that guidance isn't there. And all I'd say to any employer, and this generally comes up in a revenue audit or a HMRC audit where this thing is uncovered that they have an obligation. If you fight your corner and say, look, actually there was no guidance on this, we looked for it, there was no guidance. There is no guidance in legislation, there's no guidance in HMRC or revenue guidance on legislation. And there's no particular examples on it. And I think you should fight your corner and look for somebody who is qualified to actually fight your corner for you to a first-tier tribunal or an Irish TAC or Tax Appeals Commission case. Because if you have legislation without proper guidance to it, then you have a leg to stand on in terms of arguing the toss when it comes to being challenged. And keep going. Yeah. So the publication of the LEAF reports, they come out 11th November. There's a link to it there for anybody who likes it. It's a long report, just warn you. Read the chapter summaries first to get a flavour of it. And there's a lot of material in there and a lot of examples in that. And it'd be nice to see that this is actually used as a basis for making changes going forward. I think I've just put a little bit of the Vorspiel on the next few slides as to who's who and what was talking about. But you can read that at your own leisure. It's very small. I can't read it from here. So you can keep going. Most EU countries, are doing something about it, and I'd like to see that Ireland moves on and does something about it too. Whether we sort of line things up with the social security rules, which are way ahead of the tax rules at the moment, whether we line it up with that or we go another direction, I suppose is all to play for. But at this point in time, now that we're post-election south of the border, would like to make some movements now in terms of getting information into departments about how this could be changed and getting in front of the right people. I'm sure Anna and her team will try and help with this as well in terms of making introductions and getting us in there. I know it's frustrating for employers and employees that this stuff is not, sorted out, that they're still fighting, but we're getting there. Hopefully, they're making a little bit of traction, and just suppose support from anybody that out there who can give us support would be wonderful. And really, that's all I'd got to say. You can skip on there and let Martin in now, because I think Martin's plenty to say. And any questions, suppose, put them in the chat box and we can deal with them at the end. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Oh, brilliant. I'll get let's go now. Can you see my screens okay?
Yes.
Right, good job.
So just go from the beginning, Martin, up on the left. Yep. Perfect.
Yep, perfect.
That's us.
That okay, Emil?
That's perfect.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Rose. That was very, very good. I could definitely listen to you all day. It's really intriguing. And we probably need to do a 5-hour session of this someday, just to get everybody awful excited about what we do. I'm gonna let's say dovetail very much in with Rose on this today, and we'll try and get you a good understanding, a good broad understanding of some of the areas. And I'm going to look at the likes of the social insurance impact, the income tax impact, and link in with the working from home, the hybrid working, that type of thing, and kind of gives a bit more detail on it. So, firstly, when we talk about social insurance, it's basically the PRSI in the Republic, or it's national insurance in the north of Ireland. So it's to know kind of what the different things mean. So if it's social insurance, it's national insurance or PRSI, and the main rule is you can only pay this to one country at a time, and this is where a lot of our issues come from. If you're working in 2 different countries at the one time, so if you have a job in Letterkenny and you have a job in Derry, there has to be one country take responsibility for the national insurance or the PRSI, so the social insurance in effect. So a few of the problems that arise is that people end up paying contributions on both because they don't realise they need to be telling the other what's happening. And the second problem is that you're taking out of one social insurance and put into the other one because your situation changes and you don't realise the huge impacts that's going to be. So we're going to focus on that. The second area is income tax, the pleasure of your payslip when you look at it and you see all the deductions and you see all this income tax lost. Now, there's no complication with countries in regards to income tax. They will both take tax off you. They have no concerns with doing that, and legally they're both entitled to. So you can pay tax in 2 countries, but an important rule, you can't pay your social insurance in 2 different countries in the same time frame. So if you're working in 2 different countries in the same week, one has to pay the social insurance. I'm going to give you a few examples of different things now. And it's going to link into the hybrid working. So it's very popular now, hybrid working from home, all the different kind of ways we can do it. But essentially, hybrid working, and if this is remote from the office, but in the same country as you're working, it is within the normal rules of employment and no adjustments is required. So that if what the underline on it there is a huge importance. If you stay inside the country where your employer is, you travel to work each day and you cross the border into that country, then your rules stay as they were. And so this is an example here. I'll just get rid of down with Helen here. It's a wee example to give you a good idea of how this is. Helen's from Derry City. She works for a Sligo company as an engineer. And she's working in the office 3 days a week and uses the Letterkenny Enterprise office hot desk 2 days a week. So because she's leaving Derry every day, she's crossing the border and she's into the south of Ireland. She's within the rules. She's 5 days a week in the south of Ireland. Everything stays unaffected. Taxes are in the Republic of Ireland, and she does her tax return back to the north of Ireland and declares her income as normal, and her PRSI contributions stay south of the border because all her work duties are carried out in the Republic of Ireland. So that situation there is exactly the same as if she's going to her employer in Sligo 5 days a week. As long as she crosses the border, she's fine. Now, the change comes, and if Helen decides instead of 2 days a week in the Enterprise Centre, she works from home instead. And she's basically in Derry for the 2 days a week. And exactly what Rose had said about the 25% rule comes in here for social insurance, first of all. So more than 25% of your week is spent in your country of residence, then you're liable to national insurance. So 2 days a week, 40% of our time has now been spent in the north of Ireland. This means the rules have to change. She'll be liable to tax and national insurance in the north of Ireland, and also, as we said there at the start, she's liable to tax in the Republic of Ireland. So any PRSI benefits. Now, in this situation we're in, Helen has made this decision and the company have said, yep, go on ahead, work from home, surely. I know it's good. She's due to go off maternity in 3 months' time. And her problem now is that her PRSI benefits, which would have covered maternity benefit, she's 3 children, so she's getting a top up on child benefit in the Republic of Ireland. Her future maternity benefit, her child benefit in the Republic of Ireland, her state pension contributions to the Republic of Ireland because she's been paying her PRSI there, and any other welfare benefits will now all transfer to the North of Ireland because she's now liable to national insurance contributions instead of PRSI. And because of this, the national insurance takes over. She has no more entitlements in the Republic of Ireland to stop on the last contribution that you make. Her state pension contribution can sit there on hold for when she gets to retirement age. Her maternity benefit will now move to the UK because she's not in the South. If she made an application to the Republic of Ireland, they'd say you don't have any PRSI contributions and you're advised to go to the North of Ireland. She goes to the North of Ireland and they say, well, you haven't been paying national insurance contributions here for the last 8 or 9 years. We don't have any contributions here for you. And she's now in a very complicated situation where she has to try and move her PRSI across the border to allow her to get her maternity benefits. She's lost out financially on child benefit because she's no entitlement at there. So a simple thing of taking 2 days a week working from home has suddenly put Helen in a very, very precarious situation. And it's a very normal thing. I'm sure plenty of our folk in the listener today will know of these circumstances. And this is the exact impact. And it's from 2 days working from home. So what I would say is from an employer point of view and an employee point of view, there's a lot of people wanting to work from home. There's a lot of people wanting to be hybrid in working contracts and this type of thing. And what I would say is you need to take a step back and try and figure out what's right for you. And I think from an employer, taking a flexible approach to the frontier worker is important. And if it's possible, letting them work from hubs to keep them within your country of work. So if the work is in Derry, keeping them within the North of Ireland, so letting them leave the South of Ireland to come into the North of Ireland somewhere, using a local hub, using a relative's house, it could be the granny's house, using connected companies near their home as a base, but away from the office, but in the same country. It's so, so important. And if that can happen, then everything continues on as it was. We've seen instances where employees have made changes and made adjustments, and there's been a new contract in their place of residence, and there's been complications. And the complications come about because nobody realised that there was something more to it than just moving over from one to the other. But employees are very hard to get, and quality employees, and they want the flexibility nowadays. So understanding the employee's needs and understanding the circumstances is very, very important. And an employer doing that, it can be intrusive and thinking, well, God, well, I don't want to be asking our employee all these questions. But really, they need to be aware of the situation, and the employee has to understand that maybe it's for their best. So an employer saying that you have 20 employees living north of the border, we're going to give them all UK contracts. It doesn't work that simply. These things need to be considered. They need to be figured out, the personal situations, the tax allowances, what their family situation is. All that has to be worked out before anything is done. So it's very important to step very carefully in this area. And that's both from an employer and an employee point of view. An example here would be, if you work for a North of Ireland employer and the contract changed to a Republic of Ireland contract, you would lose access to your free healthcare in the North of Ireland. So it's something that somebody may be using the NHS all the time and find it's a great asset to them. And haven't realised that by making these changes that they're going to lose that. And in the opposite direction, somebody living in Derry, working in Letterkenny, would lose the right to an Irish medical card without a means test. So things can become very serious in these ways. And another example is on the tax side of things. A Republic of Ireland employee living in the North of Ireland with an incapacitated child would lose their extra tax credits in the Republic of Ireland and have no entitlement to extra tax allowance in the North of Ireland. So incapacitated child tax credit is a very valuable tax credit. And if you have a disabled child, for example, and you're claiming this in the Republic of Ireland, if you move your contract to the North of Ireland and you start on a Northern Ireland contract, that credit's gone. So you will be paying a lot more tax on your wages. your employer will maybe have no idea that that you're even claiming this allowance. It's not part of their remit to know that. That's for the employee. There's also loss of benefits such as universal tax credits in North of Ireland, work and family payment in the Republic of Ireland, that are going to be affected by any of these kind of changes. So it's important that if you're going to make changes, to know in advance exactly what the implications are before you do anything, because sometimes when it's done, it's too late. If you work from home full time for the employer in the other jurisdiction, so somebody is in Letterkenny and they decide that instead of having to drive the whole way through Derry, maybe to get to their employment, that they're going to work all the time from home, and there's a change made, it means that that person is then completely in the Republic of Ireland. They have no job in the North of Ireland anymore. So any benefits they had from the North of Ireland will completely stop. Any taxes and social insurance will be paid in the country to live in. So they're in Letterkenny, they'll pay them all there. And there'll be no entitlements to any benefits in the North of Ireland. You're not liable to tax in the North of Ireland anymore because you're not part of the Northern Ireland anymore. You're totally in the Republic of Ireland. But while this might work for some people and say, yes, this works great for me, I'm happy enough with this. If there was issues then with the employer, so if employment law had to come into it, it's then employment law in the country that you're now living in is responsible for you. It's not in the UK anymore, it's in the Republic of Ireland that your employment laws will be. And an employer needs to consider this, because are they aware of the Republic of Ireland employment laws? Do they know all the rules regarding their employee of what should happen in different circumstances? So allowing a employee to work permanently from home, you have a lot of issues, or allowing employee work part of their time from home. You have to say, well, which employment laws are relevant here? And a bit like the maternity benefit we talked about, Helen, earlier, if they go off maternity, well, are they getting 6 months maternity payment now because they're in the Republic of Ireland? Is it 9 months in the UK? Which are they on? Can they avail of parents' benefit, parental leave? What can they get? Redundancy is also a big thing, because redundancy rules are different in the two countries. So if the option is that you're going to be working permanently from home and it's in Letterkenny, the redundancy rules and the redundancy entitlements will be based in Letterkenny. So maybe you've lost out that you've maybe 20 years service in North of Ireland. How does that impact if you've moved now totally out of Northern Ireland into the Republic of Ireland, and vice versa? So from those areas, there's huge things in there that need to be considered. I'll keep moving on. I know I'm going pretty fast, but I want to give you a good idea of everything here. I'm going to talk about tax reliefs, what you can get. I'm going to tell you what there is south and there is north. Excuse me. Double taxation relief, and this is what Rose had talked about as well, and that double taxation relief means that you will get a credit for any tax that you've already paid. So this situation here, we're living in the north and working in the Republic. You have paid £10,000 of tax already to the south of Ireland. You have to do a tax return in the north, and you say, I've paid £10,000 tax in USC. The north would say, well, you owe us £8,000, and because you've paid more than that, you don't owe any money. You don't get any tax relief. There's no tax relief. If you've done a tax return and you're getting tax relief from declaring foreign income, you've done something wrong. There's no tax relief, but you don't owe the HMRC any money. The vice versa, if you have paid £10,000 in tax and the HMRC say you owe £12,000 in tax, you have a tax liability of £2,000, and that has to be paid to the north. So exactly touching on what Rose was talking about. If you're a married person in the north of Ireland, you still have to be treated as a single person in the Republic of Ireland if your spouse's income in the north of Ireland. So a lot of times when somebody goes to work south of the border, they'll maybe go to one of the income calculators and put in that they're married and all the different things, and they'll find that their take-home pay is very good. But in reality, when they go to work, they find that they're not taking home that at all, because they're not entitled to marriage allowances and the extra allowances. So be very careful of what you can do. You should be taxed as a single person. If you are, the Section 1032 aggregation relief can come into play, and that's where it kind of subsidises the marriage allowance, in that you can go back and say, if you're in the Republic of Ireland 2023 and you started in 24 with your spouse's income, you can go to revenue and see are you entitled to any kind of tax relief. And there's quite a complicated formula used to work out the Section 1032 aggregation relief. But in essence, it's you proving your spouse's income from the north, bringing your two incomes together and seeing is there an extra relief that you'd be due. And that's claimed back in arrears after the year that you've worked. So it's very, very important one, and it's one that we would work on here a lot. So keep an eye on it if you're looking at your tax reliefs. The single person child care credit is if you're a single parent in the north of Ireland, working in the south of Ireland, you can claim this as an extra credit. So you get an extra allowance, and it can adjust your when you pay 40% tax as well. So it's very good. Something we talked about earlier, the incapacitated child tax credit. Another very, very good tax relief south of the border, and it allows you to claim this if you have an incapacitated child. The smaller kind of reliefs can be medical and health and dental health expenses tax relief. This on the medical side could be if you're maybe seeing a consultant and you paid £500 to see them, you can claim tax relief on that bill. And that consultant could be seen in Derry or Letterkenny or in England or around Europe or wherever. It doesn't have to be in the Republic of Ireland. And nor it could also be your spouse or your child that is seeing the consultant. You're entitled to the tax relief on that if you're paying for it. The dental health expenses works in that slightly differently, in that you won't get the tax relief for minor dental work or for hygienist or a normal tooth extraction. It's more from root canals, and it could be braces or it could be crowns and more serious work, I suppose. But there's a list there, and there's a form the dentist signs, and there's tax relief available on that. And that's, again, the dentist can be in the north or the south or wherever. Income protection premiums. Rose talked about this, and it's a very important area because you can get tax relief if you're paying for an income protection policy, say in the north of Ireland. You can claim a tax relief from the south of Ireland if you're working there on the premium that you're paying. And that tax relief is available. We talked about income protection as well, and that if you are moving from one jurisdiction to the other to work, you need to check to see does that actual income protection policy cover you to work in a different country. And from also Rose, but if you're hybrid working, does that cover you still? And does the company know you're doing this? And if you did go to claim and they're looking at a shadow payroll or two different pay slips, or you have sterling and euro, is that actually eligible to be claimed on? Tax relief as well is available for the likes of tuition fees for third level education. Something you're not entitled to from the Republic. There used to be you could get mortgage interest tax relief on the olden system, but on the new system brought out, you have to be resident in the Republic of Ireland. So anyone north of Ireland cannot claim mortgage interest relief anymore on the new scheme. This is a bit complicated now, and I'm going to explain it to you, and something to be careful of if you're considering going into the Republic of Ireland to work for the first time. And we talk about the 75% rule. So if at least 75% of your income is taxable in Ireland, you receive full tax credits. So if you're in the Republic of Ireland and you're working all year long in it and you haven't worked anywhere else, you're entitled to full credits. If it's less than 75%, then you will only receive a portion of the credits, and you can end up with non-payment of tax. So an example of this would be that if you went into the Republic of Ireland on the 1st of September in 2023 and you had earned £80,000, for example, from January to the 1st of September in the UK, you're only going to earn another 40,000 in the Republic of Ireland for the rest of the year. So what will happen in the Republic of Ireland, they'll tend to issue a tax certificate if you haven't explained to them that you've already had £80,000 of earnings, and the tax certificate will give you full credits and allowances for the rest of the year. You'll find that by the end of September, you think that the working in the Republic is a bit of a utopia. It's a fantastic place because you paid no tax at all on your earnings, and you're wondering why this system is in place or what's happening. In October, you likely pay no tax, and maybe in November you start to pay it, and December you pay a bit more. And it's because you've got 12 months allowance being used in just 4 months. However, whenever the revenue would look at this, they'd say, well, hold on, we have given you far too many credits because we didn't realise that you had already 80,000 earnings in the calendar year, and you're now in a situation where you've underpaid tax to the revenue. If we look at it from the UK point of view, the HMRC will want you to declare your income on a tax return each year. So it'll be foreign income from the 1st of September onwards. You will be then declaring your income from April to September in the UK to say, well, I've now earned £50,000 in the UK, and now I'm earning in the Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland then from September to December will have very little tax, but the UK are still owed their tax for that amount of months. And then from January to March the following year, to make up the full tax year, you'll probably pay a bit more tax in the Republic of Ireland than you would in the UK. So when you go to do your tax return in the UK, you'll have a nasty surprise because you'll owe quite a tax bill to the north because of those months you didn't pay tax in the Republic of Ireland. And the Republic of Ireland will potentially be saying, well, hold on a minute, we were too generous to you for those months because we didn't realise you had UK income. So be very, very careful. Your first year in is a dangerous year. Make sure you have everything balanced out. If you're not paying tax in the Republic, or you think you're getting away with this great system, you're going to get caught somewhere with it and have a nasty surprise. So watch out for that. Turn around a wee bit. Living in Ireland, working in the north of Ireland, there's not a lot of tax relief in the north of Ireland. The double taxation relief works in the same manner. The trans-border works relief that Rose had discussed there and was explained very well is there for you. So if it is a case that you have £10,000 of tax that is owed to the Republic of Ireland and you've only paid 6, you won't have to pay that under the Transport of Workers Relief. However, and this was Rose's warning as well, you could be liable to tax on it if your partner's working in the Republic of Ireland claims a married couple's allowance, or if you've been working from home or hybrid work or anything like that, it can knock out the Transport of Workers Relief. So be very, very careful in that sense of what's happening. Tax returns, the cross-border workers have to complete a tax return in the country where they live to declare their foreign income. So this is a set rule. This is what you're meant to do. A lot of people that we would deal with would come back to us and say, oh, I was talking to somebody in Tesco's and they told me they didn't bother doing it because somebody told them they didn't have to do it, so I didn't bother. And so they're kind of going on these kind of rules that don't exist. And when people saying something, tell them what the rule is, you're meant to do the tax return and you're meant to declare your foreign income. If you work in the Republic of Ireland and live in the north of Ireland, any outstanding student loans will also be collected through the HMRC tax return. So in this sense, if we talk about that last example where somebody had just went into the Republic of Ireland 3 or 4 months, they didn't pay much tax, they go to do the tax return at the end of the year, and they've been told, well, sure, you've probably paid enough tax and you pay too much tax in the Republic compared to the North. But they find themselves now that they're owing maybe £5,000 or £6,000 tax for the months they didn't pay it for September to December of 23. And then they find out that they have a £3,000 student loan liability for the year to pay as well. And that becomes a tax debt. That has to be paid by the 31st of January. So when it was £250 a month coming out in their payslip in the North, that was fine. It now turns into a 12-month single payment that has to be paid to HMRC. So be very careful if you're dealing with student loans, and make sure to do your tax returns and get them done and keep everything right. Now, Rose was talking about this, and it's great to see Rose's great detail in this and great knowledge in this area, and it's an area very few actually know a lot about. So the rules to do with the government employees, and we deal with a lot of government employees here. Our expertise is employees crossing the border. That's what our whole world revolves around, and we have wonderful conversations with HMRC. So if your government income is your only source of income, you do not need to complete a HMRC tax return if, and this is another one of them ifs, so the big underline, you have confirmation from HMRC that you do not need to complete a self-assessment return under Article 18. Very, very important. You need that confirmation. It can't be the girl in Tesco's again telling you, well, I didn't bother doing it, so I'm okay, I'm under Article 18. There is no broad brush. There is no system to say, oh, HMRC would just say you're grand. We talk to HMRC every day on this issue, and every day they tell us it's a learning day. They didn't even know these rules existed or how they work in practice. So you need it from HMRC to say, yes, we're aware you're in Article 18 and we are agreeing that you're exempt. If you don't have that, you're not exempt, you're outside it. So public sector employee, do not assume you don't have to complete a tax return. Don't take the notion that, oh, no, I'm grand, it's Article 18. It's really not. You need to get to know it in practice. Rose touched on this, so I'll not need to go into too much on this. With the HMRC in place, if you're working from home, it invalidates the exemption for the days that you're working from home. And the exemption is too important to even think about working from home, to be honest, because with the exemption, it allows you to use your personal tax allowance in the UK as well as of income from a government job in the south of Ireland. And that personal allowance could mean that if maybe you have rental allowance in the north of Ireland and you have £8,000 a year income on it, well, if it's underneath the 12,500 of your personal tax allowance, you don't have a tax bill from it. So it's very, very good. If you have a second job in the north of Ireland, you don't need to pay tax on that again, as if it's your only job. But be very careful, you can't pay national insurance on that second job. Remember the social insurance rules. So from the Article 18 rules, it's very, very good, very, very beneficial. So don't work outside of the Republic of Ireland if you have Article 18. There's too many benefits to it in the north of Ireland. Very, very important. So anybody in a public sector job really needs to get clarification that they're falling into Article 18, and then they can use the benefits of that. Checklist for you is anybody thinking of hybrid working from home, working cross-border, changing from the north to the south, south to the north. These are areas here I want you to look at and think, would any of these be affected? And if you've checked through all these, you're grand. If you think there's a problem, get advice from somebody who understands it. So, for example, the first one, state pension. Helen, for example, we talked about start has 9 years contributions in the Republic of Ireland. One more year contributions would allow her to have a state pension in its own right in the Republic of Ireland. So should she move to this working from home or hybrid or anything else? No, she definitely shouldn't. So if somebody says to you, oh, I think your state pension will be okay, that's not good enough. You need proper, accurate advice from the right people. And that's so, so important. So areas that can be affected is your state pension, your widowers pension, child benefit payments, working family payment in the Republic, illness benefit, maternity benefit, domiciliary care allowance in the Republic, redundancy entitlements, unemployment benefit, DLA in the north, universal credits in the north, company pension payments and debt and service. And Rose talked about the pensions and the issues with pensions. Mortgage applications, huge issue. If you're going to have income from a foreign country, as they see it, they mightn't allow you to have a mortgage application at all. They might turn it down flat. Your income protection cover, are you actually covered in the other country or on the shadow payroll? Healthcare entitlements, so NHS, HSE, what is your entitlements? How's the benefits from your employer? Are they the same if you take a contract there? Is it the exact same? It probably isn't. And employment laws, which employment laws do you want to be under and which one is actually protecting you more? So very, very quick checklist to say, look, go down through all these, everybody, and please check these if you're thinking of making any changes. And if you've answered them all and you know them all, well, then you're okay. To finish, what seems a simple change in circumstances as a frontier worker can have huge effects either positively or negatively on someone's personal situation. And I think this is just it. Knowing the impact before any decision is made is crucial. So small things, as we've touched on, what Rose has talked about so well, and what we've touched on myself, it's so important. Knowing if there's going to be an impact from it before you make that decision, because it is so difficult to go back and change everything. You cannot get everything just back to exactly as it was for several months. And if you're dependent on a child benefit payments, or you're expecting the maternity benefit payments to come through, or you're thinking your taxes won't change, or your net pay will be the same, more than likely it won't be. So making that decision and knowing exactly your circumstances before anything happens is crucial. Thank you very much for listening. As I say, my name is Martin Casey. I'm based up in Uri in County Armagh, actually, an Armagh man. And if you need any help or any guidance or anything, you can give me a call. Thank you.
Excellent, Martin. Thank you so much to both you and to Rose for incredibly informative sessions there. I know there are a few questions, so if we can quickly run through these, we will be sharing all of the slides and the recording with everybody afterwards as well. So just going to the first question, are there any simple step-by-step guides to self-assessment for employees either side of the border? I think that one was put up when you were speaking, Rose. Are you able to help with that?
Simple step-by-step guide. Well, I suppose both the Irish Revenue website and the HMRC website would give some guidance, but it's not laid out. The HMRC have so much information; it's all over the place. You have to keep going from section to section. It's not laid out in an easy-to-read format sometimes. The best place to look in the UK, I always find, is actually for the low incomes tax reform group. They usually have simplestly laid out information in terms of, and easily explained information. So that's the Low Income Tax Reform Group, I think it's called, LITRG, is it? Something like that. They usually have it laid out in a nice, easy to read format. The best place sometimes to look is not the Revenue website in the south, although it's very, very, very good in its own right. But sometimes citizens' information is the first place you should look, particularly if you want to know if say a benefit is taxable or not taxable. things like that. Citizens information is actually excellent in relation to that material. And then revenue website is laid out in an easier to read format than the HMRC equivalent is, I think. Start there. Then I'm not sure if there's any checklists. There used to be some nice checklists that some firms used to produce, but they don't seem to be produced anymore. And there was also ones that the Institute of Chartered Accountants used to produce, again, not produced anymore. But sometimes they're too detailed for what you need. So I say start with those places first, and then consult even through the CBPES, consult questions through there. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I was going to mention that too, Rose. Thank you. Another question is, Rose, when is ROI moving to the 40% for social insurance purposes?
I'm not sure the exact date. I know it was discussed at the time that we were writing this report, which was up to August, but it wasn't implemented at that stage. So I expect it to be in the next 12 months or so. Yeah. But I'm only guessing, and I didn't write the social security piece. Yeah.
Right. And there's just a follow on to that. Is the change to 40% for someone living in Northern Ireland but working in Republic, or vice versa?
Sorry, is Ireland, Republic of Ireland, is moving potentially to the 40% as an EU move. And because Northern Ireland is not part of the EU for those rules anymore, the UK doesn't seem to be following suit, even though they had very similar rules prior to Brexit. They don't seem to be moving in that direction. But so I'm saying what is going to happen is there's a misalignment here. That,
Yes.
if we manage to get a rule that says, oh, you can work 2 or 3 days from home, say in the Republic of Ireland, that would match your social security rule. But the other way around, it wouldn't, for if you're living in Northern Ireland and with an employment in the Republic. So the misalignment between the two. It's nice when you see things aligned either side of the border, Anna. When they're misaligned, it makes it more complicated.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And the second part to that question is, could days taken as parental leave count as office days working in ROI, as parental leave doesn't exist in NI?
Is where the actual physical duties are carried out. So if you're not actually working, then they're not days of duties. That's my read of it. Yeah. So if you've got parental leave, you're not actually working on those days. So it's only days of duties that are counted for the purpose of employment.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And this is for both of you. So Martin, you might like to pick this one up. Great sessions and very informative. Could you provide any guidance regarding the tax position of someone resident in ROI, but has worked all their life in the UK and has a UK personal pension? From a UK perspective, their only access option of the pension is drawdown or full withdrawal. But if a client accesses capital/income from their UK pension via drawdown, what is your view on the tax treatment? I've had conflicting guidance previously. Some have said that if monies are retained in UK bank account and spent only in the UK, no tax payable either side of the border. But if funds remitted back to ROI, then ROI tax liable.
Okay, maybe I'll take that, and Martin can add in as well. But I think there's 2 things being mixed up here. One is pension rules, and the other is remittance basis of taxation. Remittance basis of taxation, where you're only taxed on the money you bring in, is only for people who are non-domiciled. And domicile is a long-term belonging. It's nothing to do with where you worked and where you live. So if you've long-term lived in the Republic of Ireland but worked long-term in the UK, that doesn't affect your domicile. It's where you were born, where your parents were domiciled at the time you were born, and if you've changed that since then. So if you were born and reared of Irish parents, you're domiciled in the Republic of Ireland, irrespective of the fact you've worked in the UK all your lifetime. So if you've got a UK pension, then generally pensions are taxed in country of residency only. So if that's an employment pension, what will happen first is the UK authorities will try and tax that through payroll rules in the UK, and tax will come off it. You're meant to return that on an Irish tax return in the Republic of Ireland. You should not have been taxed in the UK. You need to look for a refund from then. You do not get a credit for that tax. It's taxed fully in the Republic of Ireland with no credit. You look for a refund from the UK. Now, some people have missed that point, and then they can only go back 4 years for the refund. So they end up taxed in both jurisdictions. So it's one to watch. If you're about to retire, check out those rules first and take guidance on it. If you are a non-domiciled person and you have a foreign pension that is not remitted, then you're not taxed in the Republic of Ireland.
Okay, anything to add to that, Martin?
Absolutely not. Perfect.
Great answer. There's one more question. Is there any complications as setting up as a sole trader / limited company to receive income from both jurisdictions, or does this have complex taxation implications / dual tax obligations?
All of the above. Yeah, when you're two jurisdictions, it's not just income tax you've got to think about as a sole trader. You've got to think about VAT rules as well. And there's at the moment there's no threshold depending on what type of business you're in. If you go across the border, you're actually going to register for VAT straight away, depending on the type of work that you do. And then there's obviously the income tax rules as well. If you've got a base in the other jurisdiction where you don't live, you might have income tax to pay there as well as income tax in your home country. Martin, over to you.
No, that's perfect again. Yeah, that's your word. That's a great answer.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for that, for answering all those questions. There is an awful lot to think about for any of us, and all of our situations are completely unique to the individual, of course, and that's where it gets even more complex, I suppose. But I just want to let everybody know that if you have any further questions, please direct them through to me or Emil, and we can bounce them back to Martin and to Rose. And as a follow-up as well, if you have particular questions about your own situation, we'll try to deal with that as best we can. Or anytime throughout the year, please do contact any of us on the CBPES Advisors Network, and we will refer to our experts like Rose and Martin today. But I just want to probably end up here now by saying thank you so much to Rose and Martin for the time they've given us today and for taking us through very, very complex situations in a clear and precise way. And again, just to reiterate that Emil and I will share all of the information that's come about today through the recording and the slides. And thank you very much for attending, and any further help we can be, we're happy to do that. Please contact us. Thank you very much to our speakers particularly, and to CBPES. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.